Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast on what is here in Australia a wonderful Thursday, not Thursday, it's Friday. I'm a day behind. I am
Thursday.
talking though to a man who is sitting in Thursday, coming in all the way from Salt Lake City in Utah, Mr. Ryan Homan, the CEO and founder of Sales Recruiting University. Welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Thank you, Darren. I appreciate your time today.
It's we were just talking before we press record, and you said to me, "Hey, whatever you do, don't ask me questions around tax minimization strategies and accounting. But if you want to talk about
Yeah,
sales and recruiting, I am your
yeah,
man. So we'll make sure we don't have any accounting or tax
yeah,
questions."
yeah. I'm not a smart man, but I know one topic really, really well, and that's about it. Yeah.
Well, Ryan, they do say that the riches are in the niches, right? That's the old catchphrase.
Let's go. Let's go.
Awesome. So we're going to delve into Sales Recruiting University and particularly the work that you do today in terms of, I guess, finding commission salespeople for organizations and some of the nuances around that. So we'll delve into that topic. Before we do, always like to get a bit of background of the guests in terms of what has led you to what you do today. So I know you've had a sales background, but just tell us a little bit about your background, where you've come from, have not your whole life story because we've only got this is not
Yeah.
a Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah.
But I'm really specifically interested in terms of what was the catalyst for you to start Sales Recruiting University a number of years ago?
Yeah. So the quick rundown is I was forced into, commission-based sales as a young guy. I was 21 and got into this call center, worked there for a couple of years. That's where I cut my teeth, kind of doing commission-based sales, outbound calling, selling, B2B services for SEO, and got recruited into mortgage when I was 23, 24. Did that for a couple of years. That was my first six-figure commission-based sales role. At 24, 25, went into entrepreneurship, had some money saved up and tried a bunch of different things. And long story short, came across this, Craigslist ad management and interview scheduling idea. And that was one of the several businesses I've tried. I didn't know anything about recruiting. I was just trying to figure out how to make the mortgage money on my own. And in short, it worked. I was able to make money doing it. And a year later, had a company called Evolve Solar, which was a client got acquired for 52 million bucks out here in Salt Lake City. I was living in California. They talked me into closing down my little recruiting company and moving out here to be their director of recruiting. Then I got to oversee 15 offices as a director of recruiting. Did that for 9, 12 months. Got bored and left, started my second company. Did that for a couple of years. Realized I still didn't know enough about recruiting and entrepreneurship to kind of really build like a decent business. So shut that down, went to go work for a couple other larger companies as a director of sales and recruiting. Then finally came across this A to Z recruiting model that we'll talk about today.
Mm.
And then roughly 8 years ago, started Sales Recruiting University. And that was kind of my first business that worked out. And today we're an organization, over 50 full-time people and growing, recruit over 1,000 commission-based sales reps per month and help companies recruit and onboard commission-based sales reps. So very high level, we reduced the workload for them by 80% and increased the volume and quality of recruits and ultimately retention rates as they scale their internal sales teams.
It's amazing. And a bit of a mix of experiences there. You've worked for smaller organizations, you've started a couple of businesses, shut those down, worked for some big companies, and then
Yeah,
now you've, I guess, off want of a better term, hit the jackpot in what you're doing now because you've been running that now for 7 or so years.
yeah,
What were the key lessons if you look back on that whole experience? Because I'm firmly of the belief that all the things that we go through and the lessons that we learn are
for
preparing
sure.
us for what we do now and the service and the value we provide to the marketplace. If there was one key lesson out of that that's helped you make Sales Recruiting University really successful, what would that be?
Yeah, well, if I were to just pick a couple things that are top of mind, I would say I was really thankful that my foundation was selling, right? It's bias, and I think it kind of logically makes sense. But if your foundation is selling, you're going to be ahead
Mm.
as a business owner because the foundation is making money to run and grow the business. So that was good. I cut my teeth there. And then something else that sticks out is, as I proactively shut down my first two recruiting businesses, I was aware of the fact that I wasn't good enough yet, and that was okay. And so I was just trying to learn and master something so I could leverage it in the way that I leverage it today. So, shutting down the first company, moving out here to work for a large organization, shutting down the second company and acting as the director of sales and recruiting for a couple other larger companies. And, that was really, really important for my skill set that set up the foundation to make sure the service that we have today was good enough to grow an actual real business.
Mm. And you mentioned through, I guess, the introduction there, you place, or I think you said about 1,000 commission-based salespeople a month, which is
Yes.
which is a big. Is that was that like your first
Yeah.
goal, your
I'm
first
proud.
milestone?
What's that?
Was that like
I'm
the first milestone?
yeah. Is it the first milestone?
Was
I
that
hope.
like 1,000 a month, right? Because obviously there's bigger fish to fry, and we'll make it 1 million a month in some at some
Yeah,
stage. But
that's right. That's right.
but you
Yeah,
also
so
you also
yeah.
mentioned there that there was you were mentioning increasing retention rates. So
Yeah.
what I'd love to delve into, and we'll talk about the system that you use and so forth. But in order to start Sales Recruiting University, there must have been a a key problem or a key challenge that needed to be solved. And
Mhm.
through your experience working for the solar organization and the bigger company, and maybe through your own businesses, was there something that you had identified that was the catalyst for say, hey, this is the better way to do this, which has now
Mhm.
led you to have such a good track record, not just in terms of the volume that you're placing, but more importantly, the retention and the efficiency that's being developed in those organizations?
Yeah, and so my first, gosh, I've been doing, between the companies and everything, I've been doing this for over 11 years now, but the first 8 years was primarily focused on recruiting.
Hmm.
And, a few years ago, we started building out solutions for, our small to medium-sized clients on the onboarding side, because as I would look back at companies, we've served over 1,500 businesses. So just with this company, and that's not including the other organizations. And it was driving me nuts because I would have companies in the same industry with similar comp plans in literally the same cities. And some companies would be able to scale 8 figures, multiple 8 figures. And some companies in the same industry, in the same market with a similar comp plan would think our service maybe wasn't doing so well for them.
Yeah.
And it took a while to really understand that it was heavily about the leader and the leader, the sales system, the onboarding and the management, um, and the coaching of the salespeople. And so that became clear a little bit, I think, too late in my career, but it really clicked, 3+ years ago. And I started building out onboarding solutions. I can come back to that in a little bit, but I think you had a question about the what I realized about I think on the recruiting side
Mm.
to provide a valuable service. So, one of the things that was really clear is in terms of building a commission-based sales team, which is our niche, like 90% of our clients are all commission 1099 opportunities, and the other 10% maybe have a small base or maybe some training pay. But,
Yeah.
when you're scaling up a commission-based sales team, you need a lot of volume. It's really a sales process, so you got to screen out the leads and get in front of the best leads really quickly. You got to be able to sell the leads into your onboarding process, and there's more nuances to that, to the recruiting process than that. But if you can't get the volume in, if you don't have the system to go through the volume, and if you don't have the skill sets to sell your opportunity at scale, then you're just never going to onboard enough people based on whatever your retention rates are to actually accomplish your goals. And so, the typical organization at best is going to have like a 50% retention rate. But typically, what's common is more of like a 33, 25, 20% retention rate for like a
Mm.
commission-based sales force. So, in the middle would be like roughly a 25% retention rate. So that
Yeah.
means a company needs to recruit 4 people to get one to stick, assuming they have decent onboarding systems. Now, the numbers is 100 applications conservatively, at least 50, but usually up to 100 applications just to get one rep into onboarding. 100 applications come in, 80 of them need to get cycled out, 20 of them need to go through a recruiting process, and then it funnels down to two. If you have a decent process, two of them verbally saying yes, and one of them actually showing up into onboarding. And that's roughly a 10-hour time investment just to get one rep into onboarding. And so if you need to recruit 4 reps to get one to stick, now you're talking about 40 hours of time just to get 4 reps recruited and to get one to stick. And that's assuming you have decent onboarding systems. And we haven't
Mm.
even talked about the onboarding time investment. And so, the clear need was, hey, people don't know how to get the volume. They don't have the systems to kind of cycle through the volume. They don't know how to sell the opportunity properly. And they definitely don't have the time to do it. And so that was kind of the foundation of the service is creating a recruiting service around making sure they have the volume, get in front of the volume, can sell their opportunity correctly, and don't waste a ton of time in the recruiting process to get the bodies in the door. And then several years later, we developed, delivered a similar value, but on the onboarding side, which is actually more challenging than the recruiting side from my perspective.
Why is it more challenging?
Yeah, yeah, that's what everybody, when they come to work with us, they're always thinking like, if I could just get the right guy, right?
Yeah.
Everything's going to be easy, but there's so many more nuances to like building a good sales organization than that. And what they find when they, at least, from my perspective, is they go, okay, now I got the recruiting process. It's actually easy to get the bodies in the door. All the complexities are now keeping up with really onboarding and retaining these guys,
Mm.
resulting in the sales production. And so, anyways, that was long-winded, but that's a little bit about the recruiting process and yeah, how it developed.
So a question I've got with all of that, and I don't want this to sound like an ignorant question. There's a lot of organizations out there that build sales teams that they like commission only, and yet there are others that say, you know what, we want to have a small base or a combination of like an on-target earnings with a medium base and a
Yeah,
commission check or whatever the case might be. Um,
yeah.
was there anything specific? Were you I know all the stuff you just talked about there? Did you notice that there was a like a hole or a vortex in the sales industry around commission sales that was almost like facilitating this big turnover that you thought, you know what, we could solve this because my own perspective in Australia, a lot of organizations that have commission only sales, the first thing that pops into your mind is the old door-to-door salesperson to say, hard
Hmm.
sell, let's go volume, let's sell as every opportunity,
Hmm.
close it all every opportunity, which means kind of leads to a big turnover. So,
Yeah.
was there any reason why you specifically targeted that industry as distinct from working for big organizations and placing people with ITEs with a bit of a base? Because you've got sales experience and recruiting experience.
Yeah, so it's a really good question. I forgot to explain that in I was trying to do a quick version of the story, but when I quit when I got out of mortgage sales and was trying to figure out how to become an entrepreneur and make the 15 to 20 grand a month on my own without having a boss and that whole thing, when I came across this Craigslist ad and interview scheduling idea, and it's obviously radically transformed from those days. When I came across that idea, I realized that there wasn't really services doing that. And I was able to look back at the couple companies that I worked at, and I'm like, oh, the sales manager or the owner would have loved that service. And it was just a random thing. I'm like, I'm just going to try to cold call companies on Craigslist and sell them this cheap service that started out at like 250 bucks a week and, $25 a Craigslist ad. And I'd post one ad a day for 5 days. So that was 125 bucks. So I'd make 125 bucks. And I started cold calling companies and it was really easy to sell the service for 250 bucks.
Yeah.
And so I was able to make money. And so I was able to pay my bills as an entrepreneur. That was the first step. And then over time, as I started helping more businesses, I started getting companies like, you know, really large like window installation companies and larger direct to consumer companies. And they would, pay corporately for me to help all these different sales managers all over the country, although they had 5 to 10 corporate recruiters. And I'm like, why are they paying me when they have a whole corporate recruiting staff? And over time, because I started with not knowing anything about recruiting, I realized over time that what I was doing was really valuable, in that people were not able to really execute on it, even for the big boy companies that had all the money, that had a full-time corporate recruiting department. And so there was, within probably a six, max 12-month period of time, I started to understand that I'm like, I'm going to go all in on this topic. And I think eventually I'll become successful if I just get good enough.
Mm.
That's kind of how it started. And it was primarily because I'm like, hey, if I get good at this thing that there's no other service in, then I will have no competition, which will be really cool from a sales perspective as I build my business. And that was kind of where it started. That was the basics is like, oh, this is unique. Nobody's good at it and nobody really does it. No competition. I'll just go in all on this. And now we're 11 years in.
And you're absolutely crushing it.
Let's go.
Let's go.
That's
1,000 a month and high retention rates. But the other thing that it strikes me as well is good organizations build partnerships and it's about collaboration and
Mhm.
not wanting to be so a sales organization, whether it be a car dealership, a solar organization, all the different industries that you work in, they're good at what they do as in their
Yeah.
product, right? And you want them to be a
Yeah.
specialist in that. But that
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean they're specialists in attracting the talent in order to represent what they are best at in terms of
Yeah.
their sales, right? So that's why working with somebody like you is such a powerful
Yeah.
thing because you focus on the talent, right? So
Yeah.
what I'd like, we'll talk about the system that you use and some of the nuances there. But the first question I wanted to sort of ask you around that is from an attraction strategy perspective, what are organizations looking for in a commission only salesperson that might be
Mhm.
different from a big B2B retainer commission type? Um, are the attributes different?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say the attributes are different. I would just say, the quality of candidate that you can demand in the marketplace may be a little bit different. So
Mhm.
what I mean by that is, if I use myself as an example, if my company were to close tomorrow and I needed to make 20 grand a month and that was like my bare minimum, and I were to go, not if I weren't starting a business and I were to go look for, director of sales or, VP of sales or VP of recruiting type opportunity, am I going to go work with the company that is going to pay me 180K base plus, 401k and benefits and stock options with a big brand and already perfect processes in place? Or am I going to work for the small business owner that, doesn't have much in place and a small, maybe non-existent sales team that's pitching me an all commission VP of sales opportunity? What am I going to do if I want to provide for my wife and my family? Well, because of my skill sets and because what I know I deserve in the marketplace, I'm going to require the highest quality opportunity, and that's the one I'm going to take. And I'm going to get it because of my skill set, my work history. And so the small business owner or whatever business owner, they are always wanting the highest quality person, but there's kind of trade-offs, right? You can pay the best to get the best, and you also still need to be good at recruiting,
Mm,
but you also be got to be okay with dropping the cash to do it and not be
mm.
a wuss about spending your money. And also understand that just because you hire somebody that may be decent, it doesn't mean they're going to bring an ROI or work for you,
Yeah.
right? In a commission-based opportunity, and you could still hire amazing people. Like I hire amazing people every single week and our clients do, but it's because of the volume and the selling of the opportunity happening correctly. Now there may be a discrepancy in quality compared to kind of the idea that I just gave, but what companies are looking for, they're always usually thinking about like they're picturing people like you and me, like the top 1 to top 10 percenters. And sometimes we got to put them in reality a little bit and say, hey,
Mm,
the nature of your opportunity actually dictates the type of talent that you can get in the marketplace.
yeah.
So let's kind of reset our expectations a little bit. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to get quality people, but if you're in XYZ industry and you do outside sales and reps are responsible for the managing the A to Z sales cycle and you're offering an all commission opportunity where reps can't make money for 90 days, well, you can't come in and say, hey, I only want a rep who's done exactly what we've done in our industry, who's generated and closed their own leads. And, you know, you can't be that specific because your opportunity doesn't allow for that. And so
Yeah.
to answer your question, companies are typically thinking about the very best of the best. And depending on their opportunity, you got to kind of bring them down to reality. But also, you can still recruit quality if you have a decent recruiting process and if you have an exciting enough, vision of growth of the business of, with advancement into leadership and these kind of things. So, the quality person will say, hey, it's not the sexiest opportunity right now, but I'll move forward and move up into the opportunity later. In general, it's hard to answer too because every client's a little bit different, right?
Sure.
We
Sure.
have B2B clients, we have direct to consumer clients, a quality person, for a direct to consumer canvassing opportunity where they're just generating appointments for in-home closers. A quality person for that sales model is going to be radically different than like a long sales cycle B2B opportunity. And then you have the difference of, entrepreneurs experience, right? To go back to the example of the same industry, the same, sales model, same city, right? Those two owners could have a totally different perception of what quality is. And so it really depends on what the owner thinks. You know, Ideal quality is, hey, this person's done it before, really successful, but demanding that is another thing. The way that we help screen out the process a little bit, and every opportunity is different, so it's hard to kind of perfectly answer this question, but through the volume, you can get a little bit more picky. But we kind of, within our process, part of one of our steps is doing disc assessments where we screen out candidates based on, kind of how likely they are to kind of be able to work through pain as they ramp up into a new sales opportunity.
Yeah.
That was long-winded. I'll shut it off there and see if you have any
So,
more
are
questions. Yeah.
are you saying, Ryan, that you only put through D and I's in the disc profile, no C's and no S's?
Yeah, well, it depends. It depends. Yeah, it depends. But it's a good tool, right? It's a good tool. It's not a perfect science or anything like that, but it's a good tool to help screen down most likely people who will, are more likely to be successful. But yeah, there's so many nuances because it depends on the skill set and the ability of the owner. Like my version of quality could be totally different from your version of quality.
Yeah.
We have Yeah, we have companies that are like, I don't even want somebody with sales experience because I'm such a freaking awesome leader, sales trainer, onboarder, and manager. And so you get what I'm saying.
So the question there is, why are you talking to me then if that's the case? If
Sorry.
if just no, no, not you, but this client that says, I'm such an awesome sales leader and on board,
Oh yeah,
the
that's
question is,
hilarious.
well, why need our help then? Why are you coming to
Yeah,
me?
because they can't get the volume, they don't have the time, they don't have the system, right?
And they probably have turnover and they can't retain.
Yeah, yeah. Everybody does, but you know, turnover, we can improve that too.
So here's a question for you then, as Sales Recruiting University, as Ryan, the CEO and founder. We talk a lot in sales about the value proposition and what makes us unique, right? So the
Hmm.
organization, so you go through your own sales process to bring on a
Hmm.
client, and then you're going to actually serve that client by helping them onboard commissionally salespeople and improve their retention rates. Now,
Hmm.
to take a step sort of behind that, what's your clear differentiation? You mentioned before you've got a unique process. You obviously have your disc profiles and stuff like that. Is there anything
Hmm.
else that is specific to you that makes it unique? And maybe you don't have a huge amount of competition in sort of this space right now, but
Yeah,
is it something that's unique that is attractive to clients that gives them the faith that you're going to deliver for them? That and
yeah,
obviously you've got a track record of lots of different organizations you've worked for, but looking back
yeah.
on what you've done over the last 7 years, is there something that's actually been clear that's differentiating you from
Hmm.
any competitors?
Yeah, and I know this isn't kind of what you're looking for, but in terms of like, you know, our brand and we have 360 to 370 online reviews and so we got a good, presence that is 10x compared to any competitors. There's a couple competitors that have come up in the last like 1 to 2 years. In terms of the recruiting process, I'll go through the difference.
Hmm.
The biggest difference is what we do on the onboarding side. But if I were to compare like, and there's more nuances, but the way that we centralize everything around, the group interview model is one of the core things. And although it sounds kind of simple, it's really important. So to give you an example of what a couple of competitors do is, they'll manage ads, they'll do pre-screening calls just for a few minutes, and then schedule one-on-ones with clients. But what they do is, maybe they'll kind of go through that process and they'll do quick calls, but not really sell the opportunity to the candidate. And they're just trying to get volume on the client's calendar. And then they schedule 25, events on a client's calendar and take up 20 hours of their time, which
Yeah.
is one of the most important things that they're paying for is to get their time back. And then they're dealing with 60% people not showing up. And then the other 40% of people, they show up, they still don't fully understand the opportunity, the all commission aspect, what it really looks like to ramp up into the role, the comp plan, and you have the owner still selling the opportunity and investing that energy into the process while
Yeah.
dealing with all the no-shows on the calendar and still having to be the person that sells the people in multiple individual meetings. And there's again other nuances like how the ads are ran and all these kind of things. But one of the big things for us is we cut the phone interview piece and centralize everything around a group interview model. And all those candidates that are potentially a fit, not perfectly a fit yet, we don't know, but potentially a
Yeah.
fit based on their background, those get funneled into a group presentation, and we have an 8-step group interview process where they do an introduction, they go through the culture, the industry, why the industry is unique from a sales career perspective, the company story, the plans for growth in the future, the sales model, the compensation plan, what it looks like to ramp up into the position, based on the vision of the organization and where we're going to grow from a revenue perspective over the next 12 to 24 months, exactly what leadership opportunities exist, VP of sales, a few sales management opportunities, what it looks like to advance internally within those leadership opportunities. And the opportunity is sold in a group environment with potential candidates. And then after they fully understand the A to Z opportunity in a 30-minute presentation, the selling of the opportunity, then they go, okay, I fully get it. It makes sense to take next steps. And then that candidate gets funneled right into one-on-ones post group interview or the following morning. And so it reduces the workload for the leader and wasted time on their calendar by 75% and allows them just to sell the opportunity 1 to 2 times per week in a group interview environment versus a bunch of one-on-ones with people who may
Mm.
not be interested or a fit. And so, the difference is, you know, selling it in a group environment and then only spending time with people in one-on-ones that are like, hey, this is a fit. I'm interested. I fully get it. And I am interested in taking next steps potentially. So that's the biggest difference on, the recruiting side. But the big difference is what I've been working on over the last few years, which is everything that we build out from an onboarding perspective. And if you want, I can, dive into that because, understanding how to do that properly is incredibly important.
Well, it's a good point you make, and even in B2B sales, I think the statistics are pretty consistent and have been over the last number of years, and that is it could cost anything from 100,000 and maybe different in US dollars, but up to the 150 to 200,000 in terms
Yeah.
of sunk cost to go through a recruitment and an onboarding process. That if that doesn't turn out, if the salesperson doesn't meet the probation period and all the criteria for that, the company goes back to the drawing board. And some of these big companies say, well, that's just the cost of doing business. But if you think
Yeah.
about it, if you can minimize that and at the front end have a higher quality of candidate that's coming through, they then
Hmm.
self-select. They then go through a more of a due diligence process one-on-one to see whether they're actually a real fit on an individual basis. That should enhance the chances of them sticking around, you would think, in many
Yeah.
cases.
Yeah, and then a big piece is just proper onboarding. And the way companies onboard, or at least the way that the typical organization onboards is it's set up for the rep not to see success because it's so difficult to actually give the rep the training that they need to have a chance at success. Like four core things as an example that are really important in the onboarding process. And there's other things outside of this, like the way that you do your team meetings and the way that you kick off new hire orientation and support reps as they have questions in their first 2 to 4 weeks. But there's four core things that, at a bare minimum will increase any company's retention rates by 2 and up to 5x. Like
Mhm.
2x is like the worst case that we see. The first thing is pretty basic. It's not the big time saver, but it's just kind of organizing everything perfectly that happens within the first 2 weeks. So
Mhm.
I show up on Monday as the rep. I need to know my 4, 6, 7, 8 things that I need to do daily to be perfectly on track for Tuesday. And then on Tuesday, I need to know everything that I need to do daily from a admin training perspective, sales team perspective, role play, management perspective, whatever it is, on Tuesday to be perfectly on track for, Wednesday. And so there needs to be organization in the first 2 weeks. So rep
Mhm.
has clarity on what they need to do. And so the leader knows exactly how they need to lead the rep through the process in their first 2 weeks. So that's more of like an organizational tool. But where you start to get the massive retention in lift or a decrease in time investment from leadership is through like the actual training process. So the second thing is reps need the information. So if you onboard me into, your sales leadership business, I need to learn the sales system, whatever that is,
Mhm.
right? So I need to know whatever prospecting, setting, the discovery meeting, the presentation meeting, closing, follow, whatever the sales system is, right? So I need to learn the sales process, the offers, the products and services, the sales tech, whatever that A to Z process is. And so that's kind of the informational side of the job. And typically companies will do that live and they'll spend 10 to 20 hours a week doing that with reps. The problem is that reps forget 85% of the information. And so it's annoying, but you have a problem there. They forget 85% of the information, and also the leadership spent 10, 20, 30, 40 hours going through that information. And so what we like to do is we like to build out custom sales universities that automate everything informationally around the onboarding process via videos, documents, and quizzes. So the rep can, go through it a couple times and have better information retention,
Yeah.
but also to save the leadership 10, 20, 30 plus hours per week. And so you need to organize the process in the first 2 weeks. You need to set up a university and have the reps go through it, for a couple times in the first couple weeks. The third thing outside of the information reps need is they need role play. So if
Mhm.
you onboard me as an SDR as an example there, and I need to learn the outbound, and scheduling process, whatever that is. And so there's a communication aspect of that sales role, right? I do the cold call, I do my pitch, I work through some objections and try to schedule into the discovery meeting or whatever.
Yeah.
And so the reality is reps need to practice that 50 to 100 times that pitch to be confident, and ultimately to master the communication side of the sales role. And so it's obviously impossible for a company, a leader internally, to have a rep practice the pitch 50 to 100 times. And so what's beautiful is you can automate those things with tech now. So you can create AI simulations. So ultimately, you can take your customer profiles, your scripts, your objections, your FAQs, all the communication aspects of your sales system, upload that into a platform like ours, Rep Coach AI, and a rep can plug in and practice the pitch over and over and over and get scorecards based on what they're learning and get through the 50 to 100 practices. And the fourth thing, and I'll wrap up here, is reps need actual sales coaching based on real sales conversations. So if I'm in your SDR role, it's great if I got the information through the university. If it's great if I've practiced the pitch 50 to 100 times through the AI simulation. But also the last kind of cherry on top that I need you or technology to review my sales conversations and to provide actual feedback based on real sales conversations, ideally 20 plus in the first 30 days.
Mm.
And if you're getting the information twice to reps, if they're getting through 50 to 100 pitches and practicing the communication side, and if you're getting them 20 plus sales conversation feedbacks in the first 30 days, which can now be done through technology, well, you're not only saving 20, 30 plus hours per hire as they onboard, but they're finally getting trained correctly. I'm getting the information twice. I'm getting the practice in. I'm getting coaching. And that's how you start to save leadership time and increase the retention rates. And so when the recruiting side comes together with onboarding, that's kind of where the magic happens.
Sounds all sound as you're going through that sounds very logical.
Yeah.
And nothing you've described with the greatest amount of respect is unique. And you think, yep, that all makes sense. Here's the question. Why hasn't it been done before?
Well, companies don't know their sales system or they don't know how to put together their university. The role play and the automated, simulation of role playing and coaching and recording, sales conversations, those kind of things are fairly new in the last 6 to 12 months. So it's just process creation and paying attention to it and, implementing it into your sales department and going through the learning curve and making improvements until the system is flushed out. Companies just don't have the human resources or the time or the know-how or, they just, people need stuff done for them, at least from my experience.
And I think what you just described there is a system and a methodology that enables like a sales director or a CEO of an organization, particularly in a small or medium enterprise, to focus on what they're good at, and that is working on their business, fine-tuning their products, doing the stuff they need to build awareness in their marketplace. Knowing that they've got a partner like you guys to come in and actually work on, I guess, the engine of how that's going to
Mhm.
deliver value to the market. So getting the people into the organization
Yeah.
um, with understanding, with appreciation, with the right, I guess, characteristics they're looking for, and
Mhm.
then give them the necessary ramping period to get competent to
Mhm.
increase their propensity to stay and provide real value to the organization. Because as you're describing it, I'm thinking just my own experience in terms of onboarding reps into a B2B space. Yeah,
Mhm.
they go through a recruitment process, and yes, it might be based on resumes, and they might do some disc profiling or Myers-Briggs and stuff like that. But the real onboarding process, it's almost, well, welcome here, welcome to the organization. Here's your desk, here's your computer, here's your mobile phone, here's your pass. You've got great sales experience. There's your account base. Go,
Crush it. Yeah.
go and get it done, right?
Yeah. And
So it's
what's
not necessarily
really
preparing them for success.
Yeah, and what's really important too, like, I mean, if you're paying a fat salary and these kind of things, and the rep has security, then, they're not going to be too upset. But, the reality is like a top performer, when they come on board, they want the best stuff. Like, I want
Yeah.
good systems, I want good leadership, but, that's what they want. And also the kind of the average Joe or the quota producing sales rep, they need good stuff to have a chance. Maybe the baller guy like you and me, we can just go into any type of opportunity and wing it and see success because
Mm.
we're the top 1 to 5 percenters. But, the average person who's still decent, maybe in the top 20%, who's a quota producing rep, they don't have that skill set, that figured out factor, and they actually need good systems to have a chance at success. And so the average Joes or Janes, they need good systems, and the top producers, they, you know, they want good systems, even though they don't maybe perfectly need it to figure out the position. And so I found that to be super important as well. You when the people come on board, you want them to be blown away by your process. Like this is the best freaking onboarding process I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And it continues from the selling of the recruiting process. They show up to new hire orientation, they start to dive in, and they're like, I'm glad I committed to this organization because they have their crap together.
And environment is everything, and culture is everything. And if you've got an organization that has a great product, has a great offering in the marketplace, but
Yeah.
recognize they need to bring great people in to best represent them in that
hmm
marketplace,
hmm
I look at it and think, okay, we can go down the path of having a fixed cost where we want to pay 401ks, we want to pay salaries, we want to pay bonuses and stuff like that, and that's all built into the, I guess, the cost of doing business. But if I'm
hmm
bringing in commission-only salespeople, that needs to be there's certain characteristic of person that be attracted to that. If that's the case, all the money that I would typically spend on investing in employee costs, I can now spend on creating an environment that is attractive to those and give them every opportunity of being successful as quickly as possible. So, how do I
Yeah.
set these people up for success as quickly as we possibly can? The question I was going to ask you then, and it might be, it depends on industry and so forth, and I totally get that. In terms of the ramp up from the process you've described through going through the group process where they understand all the nuances, they have full disclosure in terms of what the organization is looking like, what the comp plan is, and they then filter down into the one-on-one process. Is there a typical timeline by which you have somebody that's coming in, having gone through that recruiting process, to where they're now competent from the perspective of the organization? That is, they're hitting quota, they're making progress, they're hitting the ground running. And so, how
Mhm.
much emphasis is then placed with the onboarding process for the organization to spend and time in helping this person become successful as quickly as possible? Because you mentioned before, well, you sell this stuff and you only get paid when the customer pays the bill. So that could be a 90 day turnaround time. So you're
Yeah.
sitting there thinking, well, hang on, how am I going to eat for the next 90 days?
Yeah, and there's ways to kind of improve comp to close the gap a little bit. I can come back to that if you would like. I think that'll be valuable to some of your viewers, but it depends on the sales cycle, right? So, like our B2B sales cycle, 80% of our deals happen within 30 days of what we call a presentation meeting. But a lot of B2B sales cycles are going to be 2, 3, 6, maybe 12 months. So every sales cycle is a little bit different. In terms of, so it's hard to answer because of the nature of that. The way to look at it as a company is you go, okay, what's kind of our bare minimum expectation from an income perspective? Let's say that, is 8 grand a month or 2 grand a week, which is 104K per year. You think about, okay, conservatively, what does it look like for, the average Joe or the top 20 percenter, right? Anybody that's not a top 20 percenter, which is not really impressive. Anybody in the bottom 80% is just typically not going to work out, especially in like a commission-based sales opportunity because it's so
Yeah.
challenging. So when I say average Joe, I mean like in that 20%-ish range. But you think about, okay, what does it look like for that average Joe to ramp up into our position to get to hypothetically, 8K per month? If that's 90 days, then that would be the answer for me. It depends on the sales cycle, but in onboarding, those first 2 weeks, I look at it as like almost like it's an initial onboarding and training, and also a screening tool. Which is even more important when you're scaling up a commission-based sales team because regardless of how good the systems are, and we have really good systems, for our clients, there's always going to be attrition, and so you want to
Mm.
protect. You want to maximize the opportunity and give reps all that they need to have a chance at success while reducing the leadership workload, and in making sure, especially for the small business owner who doesn't have a ton of leadership yet, maybe you want to we look at the initial 2 weeks as like initial onboarding and seeing who's really bought in and can follow the system, and post the 2 weeks if they follow the tasks. Typically there's 20, 25, 30, 35 tasks per week, so 50 plus tasks in 2 weeks. If they follow the system, then they're more worth like one-on-one time as an
Hmm.
example. And
Hmm.
um, so I think I'm getting off track a little bit, but the first 2 weeks is, kind of like a initial onboarding, going through the university, the role play, and a lot of like downtime work to protect leadership's pay, although they're plugging into sales team meetings and getting that culture experience and those kind of things. And then whoever kind of pops out at the other end, after the 2 weeks, then it's kind of like the ramp up time. At least that's how I look at it. So in the 90 days, it'd be 2 weeks initial, and then month one, month two, month three, ramping up into 8K plus per month income. Um, and there was a leadership. time investment thing or something like that that you asked. I didn't answer it technically, but I was thinking about the it depends on the leadership team, right? If you have a small business owner, they don't have their full-time leadership yet, then the
Yeah.
time investment into reps is just going to be less because I've got to run a company. And so in that case, you need to have a very, really exciting future org chart built. So, hey, we're going from 2 million to 10 million. Here's the sales organization that's going to be required to get there. Here's the few leadership opportunities required to build that organization. And those are the few opportunities available for reps that start in the rep position. And you need to like have a very objective path to earn those positions. And then once there's a leader in place, you can delegate leadership responsibilities to them, and they can increase the time investment per sales rep, which will increase rep engagement and production and retention and those kind of things. So it depends on the sales cycle and then also the availability of the leader.
So I was going to ask you with that, do you get involved or would you get involved as a part of your future, I guess, growth strategy to provide sales leadership opportunities? So extending further into these organizations, not only do you do the attraction strategy, the supply, the onboarding process, do you now maybe extend further into the organization and provide fractional sales leadership possibilities for these organizations so that entrepreneurs can continue to build, I guess, their business and innovate with their products and services?
Yeah, so we don't do like fractional leadership, anything like that. Our core done for you services are around recruiting and onboarding, but there's obviously a lot of nuances outside of that to building an organization, right? There's, the org chart, there's defining the roles, there's defining the sales strategy, there's creating the sales system, the sales tech, the reporting process, the way that you do team meetings, the
Mm.
frequency of team meetings, what it looks like to advance into sales leadership. There's a bunch of stuff like that, right? So we have a systems development and leadership coaching side to our business that's more of like a client needs to, proactively involve themselves. They're typically busy. A lot of people don't involve themselves as much as they
Mm.
can. But we have like a 20-step framework called the S20 Sales Team Operating System, and one of those things is like an objective path into transitioning into leadership, where a rep starts as a rep and has specific qualifiers to transition as a sales manager in training after 3 months, and then in months 4, 5, and 6, they transition as a sales manager in training to a full-time sales manager. So by the end of 6 months, they're the full-time leader, and the owner, if they need a leader, can delegate
Yeah,
leadership responsibilities to them and step away and not have to worry about running the sales team. And so that's more of a system that we help companies install if they want to install it, so that they can, communicate that to reps to earn the right to transition into leadership later.
love it, love it. I was going to ask you, how does AI play in all of this? Do you use AI?
Yeah, yeah. So our platform, Rep Coach AI, it's only available to our recruiting and onboarding clients right now. But that's the system where we take a client's scripts, objections, FAQs, all of those things, and upload everything in the back of Rep Coach AI along with their customer profiles and create, you know, simulations so reps can log in and experience as close to what they'll experience on on the phones or in the field, depending on whatever the sales model is.
Yeah,
So that's AI simulation. So I get to practice with the AI, prospect. And then there's also a real sales conversation coaching tool within that same platform. So that's AI based. That's always improving. Um, and then, technically within our recruiting process, there's a little bit of, AI and automation. We have our own custom applicant tracking system that we've built out to automate a lot of the administrative work behind this volume recruiting and onboarding process. So it's definitely important. And man, I love it. It's made me makes me feel like 10 times as smart. So I love it.
and
I'm,
and,
I'm like Superman with this stuff. So
and
I love it.
extremely and more productive as well because you can get more done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love it.
That is awesome. That is awesome. So, Ryan, I also wanted to ask you in relation to look casting a vision to the future. Um, it's a bit of a generalization, but there's been certainly in Australia there's been a certain stigma attached to commission only sales. All right,
Mhm.
so I come from the perspective of sales. I believe is the ultimate form of service, whether you're getting paid commission or whether you're on a salary in commission, whatever the case might be. Being a salesperson is an absolute privilege, and it is the ultimate form of service to be able to help somebody, to be able to serve somebody and help them with a solution to a problem. With all the things that you're seeing and the experience you've gained, as you cast a view to the future, what do you see? What do you see? Are you filled with um, excitement and optimism, or are there some challenges that perhaps we need to start to plan for from a selling perspective? And what sort of things should we be concerned about?
Yeah, are you talking about like the marketplace for commission-based sales either going up or down? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah, and just generally I guess the whole industry.
Yeah, so I mean, there's always going to be, an industry for commission-based sales for sure. I think the way that the market has like gone over the last 5 years, there's definitely a progression of people, there's definitely a progression, even like legally in some areas where you need like, to be W-2 and have some type of like guaranteed base. And so I think that's kind of what you're hinting at. I think those things will just kind of continue to evolve over the next, 5 to 10 years. And that's just going to happen. That doesn't bother me at all. Just kind of like transition to whatever the market is doing. And regardless, there's going to be plenty of opportunity for me and our company, even if we just wanted to solely focus on commission-based opportunities. But the reality is I'm familiar with the recruiting space as well. And our process and the cost compared to the traditional recruiting model for the companies that help place salaried reps, our value is like 5x that because of the
Yeah.
cost difference. A lot of those companies are not doing anything special, and our process can save the same amount of time and get 5 times the amount of value and volume of candidates versus, you know, paying 25% of a $80,000 salary, and that company has to
Mm.
pay the recruiting company 25 grand. It's like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I think we don't need it right now, but I think we'll like slowly, the whole disrupt language is kind of maybe cheesy to some, but I think there'll be a little bit of that over the next couple years. But there's definitely, a progression to it. Me personally, I love it because that's where, I was blessed to be forced into as a 21-year-old. And then if I never would have been forced into commission-based sales, I wouldn't have been making 10, 15, 20 grand, 12 years ago at a 20,
Mm.
at 24 years old. And so to me, it changed my life. And, I think it's freaking awesome. So me, I don't want a boss. I like freedom and I want to make good money. So I'm all into the idea. But, from a marketplace perspective, I'm sure it'll slowly kind of change in the way that it is moving forward, but it doesn't bother me.
Well, the thing with all of that is that if you're working in, I mean, and you've got to have a good product and a good service that you're representing, right? If you're
Yeah.
selling crap, you might be able to sell a few, but eventually it catches up, and
Yeah.
you don't have anything to sell. You don't have any customers to sell
Yeah.
to. But when you're in a commission only sort of role, yes, it's hard work, and I guess that's why something like the disc profile is such an important thing to say. Well, let's just separate the people who are driven by certainty versus the ones that are driven by variety and innovation and stuff like that. In
Yeah.
commission-based sales, in great organizations, the sky's the limit. It's just depending on
Yeah.
how much you want to work and
Yeah.
how much desire you have to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the overriding question, isn't it? When you're thinking about sourcing talent,
Hmm.
what's the capacity that people have? How much of a risk do they want to take, and how much do they want to bet on themselves in terms of,
Yeah.
hey, do they want to have a 401k and all the stuff that comes with that? And in Australia, it's superannuation. Or
Yeah.
they want to back themselves and say, you know what, I could be my own boss and create my own economy based on my
Hmm.
capacity to be effective. It's on me.
Yep. Yep. And you know, the reality is I looked it up a couple weeks ago. The average in the US, I think the average small business owner makes 70 to 130 grand a year. So that's an
Hmm.
average of 100,000 bucks a year. And that, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I just think about what it's like to be an entrepreneur. I would be so pissed if I was making that kind of money right now. And then I also compare it to like income opportunities that we have just internally within my organization, which for some leadership roles are 5x that average.
Yeah.
And so those type of opportunities don't exist in non-salary type of opportunities.
Mm.
And so I think it's better, but you have to have the mindset to get through those first 1, 2, 3, 6 months, whatever the kind of the length of the ramp up timeline is. And that's ultimately why it comes back to being a volume game, right? You can pitch the industry, the company, the plans for growth in the future, the sales leadership, the comp plan, the income ranges, all of those things. And you may
Mm.
be able to sell opportunity in the recruiting process, and people go, you know what, actually, I want to go for it. Let's go. And then they
Yeah.
get kicked in the teeth 2, 3, 4 weeks in and they start dropping off. And that's kind of the trade-off. That's a part of the game.
Yep.
That's why the recruiting, the onboarding systems need to be built for volume so the leadership doesn't get burned out as they kind of go through that process. You can pay the salaries, but you better have the money to burn to kind of grow the organization in that way. Again, it's pros and cons.
Yeah, but also, I mean, the onboarding process and the university you create, you would have gone through all of that in terms of, hey, you're going to get rejected. You're going to have to handle objections. You're not going to be able to have a
Yeah,
85% close rate, irrespective of you having the best product on the marketplace.
yeah,
And I keep saying this, sales is not for everybody, just like sales leadership is not for everybody, but it is and can be one of the most rewarding professions on the planet,
yeah.
because you have the capacity to create whatever income level that you want to create. And that's what's going to attract certain people if they're prepared to work hard.
Yeah, and
Smart.
that's what's, for leaders, like, I used to think like you have to be this highly influential, charismatic leader for people to, follow you. And there's an aspect to that which is true. Like I can get people to run through walls for me, but also as I got more experienced, I realized in comparison to every other organization out there, which 80, 90% of them have crappy systems, if you just simply have really amazing systems, good recruiting, good sales system, good onboarding, good meeting structure, like have the basics in terms of a system, well, just in comparison to the normal organization, the system will make you look like an above average leader. And so,
Yeah,
um, and yeah,
love it.
yeah.
Love it. So before I ask you one final question, people that want to know more about you, connect with you, and learn more about Sales Recruiting University, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, so we actually have something cool coming out here in the next 2 to 4 weeks. I got a little bit of a landing page right now. S20 Sales Team, letter S 20salesteam.com. You can get a free copy of the S20 Sales Team Operating System workbook. It'll be on Amazon and a couple places here in the next 2 to 4 weeks, but that's a free PDF version, and we'll send you 90 days of really good content via email. And there'll be opportunities to connect with us there if you'd find value in that. So that's a 20-point framework that'll walk you through recruiting, developing your org chart, and all sorts of amazing things. Very, very valuable.
Nice. And if it's okay, I'll put your LinkedIn profile on there as well for people who want to connect with you, if that's
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
All right, excellent. So Ryan, you've got an audience here listening. You might have entrepreneurs, small business owners. You might even have some corporates that think, maybe we can expand our sales team by actually putting in a commission-only framework here. So,
Mhm.
what would you leave them? What would be a parting message to organizations and senior leaders listening to this right now about improving their attraction and retention rate on sales talent?
Yeah, well, in terms of the company that's already doing a salaried model, like we have companies that are doing salaried models all the time. It's typically small business owners with not like successful sales teams yet that, see us and we transition them from a salary model to an all commission model. But because it's better recruiting, better onboarding systems, they actually see more success versus the salaried model and they're saving hundreds of thousands of dollars a year doing it. And so, it's really comes down to the process of it. And it's a
Hmm.
process I've been working on for over 11 years. But if I'm, thinking about, any type of business owner, my mind goes to, hey, if you're down for the volume game and you understand what it takes, then you can scale up a sales team, a commission-based sales team. And if you want to save a ton of time in that process and get higher volumes of quality people and increase retention rates of 2 to 5x, then you can reach out to us and we're happy to do that. But it's a volume game and the process is required to not burn out the leadership's time.
Mm,
Ownership doesn't have the time to properly invest into the volume game. And your sales manager, if they're doing that for you, they're going to hate their job, which is not what you want. You want your manager focusing on actively producing sales reps and improving internal systems versus recruiting and onboarding reps that may not work out. And so, if you want to save time, not burn out your leadership team, increase the volume and quality of recruits, and you're okay with some attrition, then you can scale.
love it. And to that point, they need to call and contact you, Sales
Yeah,
Recruiting University.
yeah. Look us up, Sales Recruiting University.
Excellent. Excellent. Awesome. Hey Ryan, been a great conversation. Greatly appreciate you jumping on a Thursday late afternoon. It's been a great conversation, and thank you for being a guest on the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast.
Thank you, Darren. Appreciate it.
Good one. Have a good day.